Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another audio podcast and video podcast of Political News Time. I'm your hostess, Alex Mayers. So I hope everyone out there is having a wonderful, relaxing weekend. Maybe you're having a productive weekend. I'm having a little bit of both. But I just wanted to pop on this morning and continue the discussion in regards to this movement that is utilizing the hashtag ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery. I have done, I suppose about 2 or 3 other podcasts about this particular issue, and you can check those out on politicalnewstime.com so that you can catch up with me, okay? But I'm very concerned in regards to this particular movement because so many of the themes that I'm seeing people talk about on Twitter directly reflect and parallel a lot of white nationalist and white supremacist mantras, rhetoric, and ideals. I believe it was just yesterday that there were some Klansmen dressed in their full KKK garb that showed up at some sort of a venue in a place called Hillsborough County. And, since Trump has been in office, it seems like the racism has intensified as far as materializing into, the third dimension, our everyday lives. And I think that the last thing that needs to happen are additional groups outside of these white supremacy and white nationalist groups that continue to propagate and encourage segregation and separatism and whatnot. There's an article that I do want to read to all of you this morning, and it's an article that I found on a website called medium.com, and it's titled, Why Hashtag ADOS is Trash, Receipts Attached, and is written by an individual known as Talib Kweli Greene. Okay? Now, I don't know if this particular article is 100% authentic or honest, but a lot of what's in this article reflects things that I have noticed and also things that I personally have experienced since discussing hashtag ADOS on social media. First off, I don't think that they should be using this hashtag because it does seem to be a hate group, and by saying American descendants of slaves, that's too big of an umbrella. I'm an American descendant of slavery, okay? But I am not for ethno-nationalism, even if it revolves around being African American, and I'm not about basically attempting to be a black supremacist. Somebody questioned me. They're like, oh, I don't even think someone can be a black supremacist. Yeah, it is possible. It is possible. Just because right now being African American or black by default attracts a lot of racism, it doesn't mean that in the future things won't change. And it doesn't mean that at some point in time blacks might be at the top of the totem pole racially or class-wise rather than at the bottom. So I just don't think that any group should be supremacy or supremacist. I think that everyone needs to truly look at one another as an equal as much as, they can, and realize that all of us in humanity are one. It's hard to wrap your mind around that at times, but we really are all one. But I did want to just make a few notes in regards to some things that I've observed and that has happened to me since I have started discussing and criticizing the hashtag ADOS movement. Because honestly, if they were valid, it would be hashtag DOTAS, Descendants of Transatlantic Slavery. That's if you really want to get reparations for everybody, if you really wanted to pay a debt that's owed, that's what it would be. And that's actually my second to last podcast. But so since I have criticized hashtag ADOS, I have been labeled an MBW by one of the ADOS most prominent speakers, a guy known as Tariq Nasheed. MBW stands for Negro Bed Wench. I find that very offensive, and I actually find that to be worse than being called the N-word by somebody who is not African American. Okay? I've noticed that the hashtag ADOS movement is mainly spoken out by men who seem to embody a high level of misogyny. I've always felt that within the black community, African American males have embodied too much misogyny. I always have. I'll just say it. And I think that it needs to change. I think that this generation coming up doesn't seem to embody so much misogyny. But with guys like Tariq Nasheed on the scene, it's like they're trying to bring it back. I don't like that. There were two ADOS supporters who tweeted me directly. One known as, I believe his name was Zachariah. Another one, I think he said his name was Shamil or something. I'll have to look. But they basically told me that I needed to delete my podcast in regards to my commentary on the hashtag ADOS. And then they tried to tell me what kind of podcast I should be making. And I had to tell them, I'm like, look, I make my podcast on my own dime. I'm an independent investigative journalist. Oh, and by the way, they told me that I am not adept at that. Anything that they could say to insult me, they did. But just the fact that they tried to direct my podcast when this is an independent endeavor that I do on my own dime, I found incredibly insulting. I felt it to be very hurtful. And it just made me wonder, like, who is paying these people to be so aggressive toward anyone who's criticizing them? Because they questioned who's paying me, and nobody's paying me. They also asked who sent me, and nobody sent me. My answer to that was, well, I guess God. Because that's who I'm pretty sure sent me to Earth, was God. But anyways, another thing that happened was that certain people on social media, including Tariq Nasheed, questioned my heritage. I was labeled as being a Caribbean immigrant, and I am not a Caribbean immigrant. I am African American. I was born in Kirkland, Washington. Both of my parents are African American, born in the United States. My only grandparent actually not even my only great grandparents that I know about that are from somewhere else outside the United States are on my father's side. My father's father's father and mother were from Trinidad via Morocco and Africa, the Igbo tribe of Africa specifically on my great-grandmother's side. So I thought that was weird. I also was lied about by that ADOS promoter, Tariq Nasheed. He said that I had been a ghetto gagger porn star. I never performed for ghetto gaggers. I never worked with that company in any way, shape, or form. And over the past few years, I have done my best to draw a close to the abuse of women, specifically women of color, black women, by D&E Media, aka Ghetto Gaggers, aka Latina abuse, aka facial abuse. I don't think really much of anyone aside from my friend Melissa Hill has spoken out about the harms of Ghetto Gaggers upon society than her. Yet, I was immediately linked by this guy, Tariq Nasheed, who's an ultimate misogynist. He wrote like these pickup artistry books to that adult enterprise. So I thought that was weird. And he never apologized for being wrong. Goes to show. Another thing I don't like about ADOS is that they are very anti-immigration. I believe that the ADOS movement actually began by a group called Progressives for Immigration Reform. And I am not anti-immigration. I do not like that ADOS seems to alienate people of African descent from the island nations or Central America or South America. That's not going to get anyone of African descent anywhere by creating bigotry within the African or black community. So I didn't like that. Another thing I noticed is that the current sponsor of the HR 40 proposal or legislative bill to create a study to figure out how reparations would come about if they were ever to manifest is a woman named Sheila Jackson Lee, and she is a daughter of immigrants from Jamaica. So you've got this Tariq Nasheed, and you have quite a few hashtag ADOS proponents on social media just berating and being incredibly bigoted towards Jamaicans and Americans. Yeah, it was a Jamaican American who has continued this discussion about reparations, Miss Sheila Jackson Lee. You know, it's like, talk about lack of gratitude, talk about being ungrateful, and just talk about being a jerk by being anyone who would be somebody who's chosen to be anti-immigrant, considering that it's the daughter of immigrants who is basically holding the future of reparations in her hands at this moment. I think anyone who's criticized her should be banned from ever getting any reparations, personally. And one last thing I wanted to mention in regards to the hashtag ADOS situation on social media is that it seems that this group of individuals since 2016 has been very critical of Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is not my favorite Democratic candidate. If you look at Alexandra Mayer's Live and you look at politicalnewstime.com, you will see that I have spoken about quite a few Democratic candidates. And you'll see who I'm partial to, or at least was partial to, because my mind is shifting a bit. But I just thought that it was very strange that they're so fixated on specifically knocking her down. It does make me wonder exactly who is funding the hashtag ADOS movement, and I'm going to keep researching so I can find out. And I want to know why specifically they are so against Kamala Harris, because it doesn't seem like it's really so much being against her. The first tweet, which I have screen capped, that I noticed from the ADOS spokesperson Tariq Nasheed back from 2016 about Kamala Harris, specifically pointed towards who she's married to rather than even her politics. He specifically noted that she's married to a white American male. Why is that a problem to Tariq Nasheed, especially considering that, according to my research, his current wife is multiracial. Her mother has blonde hair and blue eyes. His mother-in-law is a white American woman, at least from what it appears. Why would he have an issue with Kamala Harris? Does he only have an issue with white American men and not white American women? Is that the kind of misogynist and the kind of racist he is? How many people who follow this hashtag ADOS movement are concurring with him? Because if you're concurring with something like that, you are no better than the KKK. Not in my opinion. So anyways, let me go ahead and read this article that I mentioned earlier from medium.com, and I will put a link to it in this video podcast when I repost it on politicalnewstime.com. It is titled, Why Hashtag ADOS is Trash. Receipts Attached, by Talib Kweli Greene. This was posted on April 10th, it appears. In January of 2018, Steve Bannon, the architect of Breitbart.com's alt-right rise to the Trump White House, a man who told a gathering of white nationalists in France to wear the title of racist as a badge of honor, was fired from his job at SiriusXM after Jewish actor Seth Rogen canceled SiriusXM appearances in protest of Bannon's hateful rhetoric. Many of SiriusXM's hosts of color, including Reverend Mark Thompson, who hosts a show on SiriusXM called Make It Plain, were very vocal in their opposition to SiriusXM's decision to give Steve Bannon a platform. Today, Mark Thompson's job at SiriusXM seems to be in question due to a physical altercation he had in Newark. When I look at the details of the events leading up to the altercation, it seems to me that SiriusXM may be in danger of making the wrong decision again. Let me back up. The Reverend Mark Thompson has been a leading activist journalist in the Black community for over 25 years. His show, Make It Plain, which was the only show of its kind to address black issues nationally for years, was the first talk show on Sirius XM, premiering back in 2001. He used his show to broadcast live from Occupy Wall Street, and he has been on remote wherever ground zero for the movement was, from Sanford, Florida to Ferguson, Missouri. He's been arrested for protesting on behalf of the people he joined, Dick Gregory, Maxine Waters, and journalist Gary Webb, in exposing the CIA's role in the crack cocaine epidemic. This brother has certainly paid his dues. I was only marginally aware of Mark Thompson's pro-reparations work before both him and I started being harassed by a new hashtag movement bubbling online called ADOS, which stands for American Descendants of Slaves. I saw him on Joyanne Reed's MSNBC program being described as a member of the National African American Reparations Commission, NAARC, due to his research and support of the concept of reparations for African Americans who are descended from enslaved people. Like Mark Thompson, I have always been pro-reparations. In my first solo song ever, 2000 Seasons from 1997, I rap, quote, "They call it reparations, but they call it extortion," end quote. In 2004, on Kanye West, that pre-Trump Kanye, by the way, We Can Make It Better, I rapped, "Reparations, how you calculate the amount to be paid. You try to imagine America without the slaves." I am of the belief that African Americans absolutely deserve reparations, and I've worked closely throughout my career with a pro-reparations community activist group called the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement. However, none of that mattered to a woman named Yvette Carnell, a founder of this ADS movement, when she decided to wander over to my mentions to aggressively critique me for writing what amounted to be an anti-Trump tweet. The ADOS position is that we should not vote for any Democrats unless they promise to support reparations. They don't hold the GOP to the same standard. And even though Yvette Carnell used to support the Sanders campaign in 2016, she was very upset at me, implying that I like Bernie Sanders better than Donald Trump. And then there's a tweet posted, and I'm going to read to y'all what this tweet says. Talib Kweli Greene tweeted, "I support the idea of reparations, but I am more in support of a plan for reparations than I am in support of shouting, 'Reparations now!' into the void, or holding my vote hostage and letting Trump win again because the candidate who can beat him doesn't see that vision." I actually agree with that tweet. But then this woman known as Yvette Carnell, her Twitter is Breaking Brown, she tweeted, "This is the problem with black celebrity. Loud and wrong. I don't know why we should be concerned with what you think anyway. Hashtag ADOS, life is imploding. And you obviously don't understand what the data suggests about the need and urgency of a reparations movement/program." And these tweets are from March of 2019, by the way. Okay. "I was taken aback when I received such a vile personal attack on my character and my life's work from what seemed at first glance to be a pro-black woman. It was clear to me that I supported a plan for reparations in the tweet she was critical of. So why the attack? I had never heard of ADOS or Yvette Carnell before I wrote the tweet. So why did she take a tweet that wasn't written to her or about her so personal? Why did she assume I was talking about her and her movement? I believe that's called hit dogs hollering. Wouldn't it have been more prudent and pragmatic to share her plan with me rather than dismiss me wholesale as some, quote, loud and wrong black celebrity, end quote, in our first exchange ever? As bad as Yvette Carnell's initial unsolicited tweet to me was, her followers were way worse. same thing happened to me. I didn't have an interaction with Yvette, but I'd say Yvette's male counterpart was this Tariq Nasheed. His followers were horrific towards me. Let me continue. They collectively decided I was a Haitian immigrant, weird flex, as a way to justify their dismissal of my position. Just like Tariq Nasheed mislabeling me a Caribbean immigrant when I'm not. Patterns. I was born in Brooklyn. My mother was born in New Jersey and my father was born in Queens. We've never been Haitian. It became apparent to me very quickly that ADOS was an anti-black immigrant movement when scores of ADOS accounts began to harass me, an American-born citizen, for being an immigrant. I was called a coon, a sellout. I was told to go back to Haiti. And I was called a Negro bed wench. Yeah. When I pointed out that Yvette Carnell made a YouTube video entitled Pan-Africanism is Dead, I was told to go back to Africa. One ADOS person threatened to shoot me, and several others, including a verified Twitter user named Juno Joyner, who once lost on American Idol 11 years ago, threatened to show up where I performed to physically assault me. These bigoted and sometimes violent worded attacks came daily by the hundreds for almost a month straight. Supposedly pro-black ADOS folks were using the same exact hateful rhetoric that white supremacists have used on me for years in digital spaces. Something was fishy. Yeah. See, this is what I have been thinking. And like I said, I will have to research more on this particular article. But so much of what this individual is writing is exactly what I have experienced, but in a shorter time frame. So I don't think that this is fabricated, not one bit. The strategy for ADOS to get reparations seemed to be attacking famous, mostly black people for two reasons. First, for not being black and American enough, according to a standard set by ADOS, and secondly, for being anti-Donald Trump. Yvette Carnell's partner in the founding of ADOS is a former Los Angeles County District Attorney named Antonio Moore, who spends his free time making YouTube videos that critique filmmaker Jordan Peele for hiring Africans that haven't been born in America as the lead for his movies. ADOS folks consistently tweet about taking down Ta-Nehisi Coates, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, Bernie Sanders, Roland Martin, Angela Rye, and every other prominent public critic of Donald Trump. They say that they only go after Democrats because Democrats have taken the black vote for granted. While that statement can be proven true, ADOS fails to realize that the results of only going after Democrats is handing a free pass to the GOP. When you raise that question, far too many ADOS folks begin to defend Trump and double down on their attacks of all Trump's opposition. This is a recipe for failure, in my view. And then this article posts a photo of this woman, Yvette Carnell. I don't know if this is photoshopped or not, but as you can see, she's wearing a Trump hat. And she's the one who supposedly is one of the primary founders of American descendants of slavery. I mean, if you, and I'm going to continue reading this, but if you watch my podcast from yesterday, I talk a bit about the trade wars going on, right? And I talk about President Xi from China and how Donald Trump seems to be trying to create a deal with them to lift the tariffs, because by making those 30% tariffs on Chinese goods, I mean, it's hurting everybody. It's hurting the consumers of their goods, and it's making China not necessarily want to consume America's goods, our resources from our agricultural industry, right? And that's like a lose-lose for everybody, because I mean, the reality is China is just, they're number one right now. They worked hard. Slow and steady wins the race at times, you know? But the thing about China that I was saying yesterday is that they are a very xenophobic culture. And it seems that a lot of the Republican rhetoric seems to be meant to parallel the Chinese culture in a strange way. Everything from, you know, this giant wall between Mexico and America that Trump wants to build, which is a parallel of the Great Wall of China, to this resurgence of white nationalism and ethno-nationalism, which is something that the Chinese have practiced for years. It's like Trump is, you know, trying to create a foundation for himself to where he can approach President Xi and China and be like, hey, yeah, your status is above mine. You know, you could just cast me out for all time, but I'm going to appeal to your vanity and show you that I'm trying to be just like you. Yeah, that seems to be kind of what Trump is doing, right? So take a look at that, because it's almost like with this ADOS movement, at least from what I'm able to perceive so far, they're trying to convince Americans who are the descendants of slavery, African Americans, to have the idea to segregate themselves from society. And it's like they're trying to use reparations as a catalyst to do this. I think we all need to remember what happened with the Native Americans, okay? The Native Americans were given certain partitions of land. Yes, they are allowed to have their legal casinos on their land, which are lucrative, but only a small segment of the Native Americans are truly wealthy from these casinos. The wealth is not distributed evenly, and they're stuck on these reservations. You know, a question I posed is, okay, so you're going to give me these reparations, but are you going to say, okay, the only way that you can have these reparations is if you move to a certain region of the United States? No! I've already planned on living my life without the reparations anyway. If somebody gives me reparations in my lifetime, I'm not going to turn it down. I'll be like, hey, thank you for the reparations on behalf of my family and my ancestors. But for reparations to be used as a weapon or a catalyst to create more hate and segregation and the element of separatism within the United States, that's not a good thing. So you got to think long term, because, you know, a lot of African Americans, we do have biracial and multiracial family members. We need to think about their futures too and where they're going to be. It's not just about us, because nobody lives forever. Okay? Anyway, I'm going to continue reading this now. When I began peeling back the layers of ADOS to try and understand why they seemed so focused on attacking immigrants and all anti-Trump black people, even clearly pro-reparations anti-Trump black people, what I found was startling. Largely due to the impeccable research of a Twitter user named Imani Kushin, I began to see that Yvette Carnell, whose Twitter name is @BreakingBrown, seemed to use her YouTube channel to push right-wing, pro-Trump, anti-immigration propaganda. She has videos titled, "Why is Everyone So Afraid of Steve Bannon?" Does she not know who he is? And, Trump is right about black poverty. There was a video of her wearing a MAGA hat, which she deleted once we called her out for wearing it. She has tweets about how Trump looks so presidential on TV and about how Trump is correct about birthright citizenship. She uses her Twitter account to push anti-immigration propaganda, and she uses Nazi slogans like, quote, blood and soil. She wrote an essay on her Breaking Brown blog entitled, "Black Lawmakers Shouldn't Be Out Here Calling Trump Illegitimate." Okay, so she has a problem. Okay, she has a problem. We're learning that now. Despite her denials of her support for Trump, the evidence is clear in that action. Yvette Carnell is pushing the GOP's message. As damning as all of these facts about Yvette Carnell's actions are, her intentions were not clear to me until I found out that she is an admittedly proud board member of an anti-immigrant organization that deceptively calls itself Progress for Immigration Reform. In case you are someone who doesn't understand that progressives generally don't fight for immigration reform, let me break this down for you. PFIR was designated as a hate group by the Anti-Defamation League and the Southern Poverty Law Center because it is funded by John Tanton, a white nationalist well known for creating right-wing think tanks that are specifically designed to get minority voters to align with GOP-supported anti-immigration policy. Now, I understand why everyone following Yvette Carnell and supporting her movement were so hateful to immigrants. That was by design. That's the whole point. ADOS is an insidious right-wing funded anti-immigration hashtag movement cloaked in the righteous language of reparations. What most ADOS folks say when I present the evidence that Yvette Carnell is a fraud is to look at their website, ados101.com. I have received so many messages from people to look at that website, and I will. I'll talk about that tomorrow or the next day, something like that. But everything that this guy is saying in regards to their pattern of behavior, I have directly observed. So far, I can't say that this particular piece I'm reading all of you is 100% fraudulent. I can't say that. There's certain things I do need to research, but I'd say as of current, it's at least 75% legitimate and valid. On this site, created by ADOS co-founder Antonio Moore, Ronald Reagan is celebrated as being helpful to the black community. Donald Trump is celebrated as being helpful to black communities. Barack Obama, the first black president, is critiqued as not being helpful to black communities. I have no issues with critique of Obama, but when critique of Obama is buttressed in with celebration of Reagan and Trump, that's clearly right-wing propaganda. Right-wing propaganda. Also, reparations isn't mentioned until the very last paragraph of their agenda on their pro-reparations website. This is suspect to me when I pair these facts with the fact that Antonio Moore once said that due to his genetic makeup that he is culturally closer to a white American than an African. I can conclude that the ADOS movement is being run by charlatans. I mean, if Antonio Moore is more like a European American than he is African, why is he even entitled to reparations? Things like that don't seem to make sense. At least not to me. Do they to you? But anyway, do I want to read the rest of this? I'm not going to read the rest of it because it's so long, but I will link it up on politicalnewstime.com. But you get the idea here. You get the idea. There's a lot of inconsistencies with this ADOS situation. I'll just read the last paragraph to conclude this podcast, okay? But again, read this for yourself because it's a very good read. ADOS folks will try to tell you that if you diss ADOS, you are dissing all black Americans ever. That is a lie. I've been a black man from Brooklyn my entire life, and I never heard of that goofy hashtag until they came after me a month ago. It will never define my experience as a black man in America. And I agree. I have been a black woman my entire life. I am 40 years old. And until this ADOS thing came about, until I was called a Negro bed wench, by the ADOS supporters. I don't come from slaves. I come from an enslaved people. There's a difference. They will try to tell you that they have pushed the issue of reparations to the forefront and nobody before them has. These are lies that disrespect our ancestors and leaders whose shoulders we stand on. Sheila Jackson, along with Ron Daniels and John Conyers, introduced the H.R. 40 reparations bill in 1989 and have pushed for it every year since. Organizations like National African American Reparations Commission and the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America have been doing all the work for years. I used to sell The Debt by Randall Robinson at Nakuru when I worked there for 20 years ago. Since then, Robinson has founded Trans-Africa, a pro-reparations advocacy group. Scholars from Dr. Claude Anderson to Derek Hamilton have advocated for reparations without needing align with white supremacists like ADOS founders Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore. By making reparations a hold-your-own-nuts divisive issue amongst black voters, ADOS will usher in a GOP victory for Trump in 2020. And if you think attacking other black people who also deserve reparations from their respective countries is going to get Donald Trump or any GOP-run government to give you reparations, I have a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. ADOS is a danger to actual black activists who have been active in the fight for reparations. This is a very good piece. Very good piece. Again, it's by Talib Kweli Greene. I will link all of this up on Political News Time. And I'll go ahead and end this podcast now because it's a little bit longer than I anticipated it to be. If anyone has any questions, now is the time to ask. But I do want to thank all of you who sat and bared with me through my reading aloud some segments of that article, which is titled Why ADOS is Trash, Receipts Attached. Make sure that you look at my previous podcasts in regards to this issue, which are linked up to politicalnewstime.com. Make sure that you subscribe to the Political News Time YouTube channel. More subscribers, the better. Let's get the word out on some elements of politics that very few people really want to talk about, or maybe that they're afraid to talk about. And thank you, Boxing MMA 365. I appreciate you watching my podcast here in the morning here on Periscope. So have a wonderful day, everybody. I'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Bye-bye.